In a small American town, nestled between rolling green hills and a river that whispered secrets to the wind, there was a butcher named Tom Henderson. He was a gruff man, his hands thick with years of cutting meat, his apron always stained with the day's work. He wasn't one for much conversation, but he had a soft spot for a peculiar dog that visited his shop every morning. The dog, a scruffy, golden-furred mutt with intelligent, deep-set brown eyes, had no name that anyone knew. He had appeared one day outside Tom's butcher shop and had been a regular ever since. Every morning, like clockwork, he would sit by the door, waiting patiently. Tom would toss him a bone or a piece of leftover meat, and in return the dog would give a small wag of his tail before trotting off. The townfolk had different theories about the dog. Some said he was a stray. Others believed he belonged to an old man who had passed away. No one knew for sure, but Tom knew one thing: this dog was different. One crisp autumn morning, Tom noticed something unusual. Instead of running off with his treat, as he always did, the dog just stood there, watching him. When Tom stepped outside and locked up the shop, the dog followed. Tom frowned. "Tom, go on now," he muttered, waving his hand, but the dog didn't budge. He just stared up at Tom with those knowing eyes. With a sigh, Tom started walking home. To his surprise, the dog padded along behind him, tail swishing lazily. He wasn't begging for food. He wasn't sniffing around like a typical dog. He was just following. For the first few blocks, Tom ignored him. But as they turned onto the quieter streets leading toward Tom's house, a strange feeling began to settle in his gut. Why was this dog following him now? He had been coming to the butcher shop for months, but never once had he shown any interest in Tom beyond the usual morning routine. Tom stopped. The dog stopped. "Tom! All right, what do you want, boy?" The dog tilted his head but didn't move. It was as if he were waiting for Tom to figure something out. Tom shook his head and kept walking. Maybe the mutt was just lonely. But deep inside he felt something wasn't right. Tom's house sat at the edge of town, a sturdy place with a wooden porch and an old rocking chair he never used. He unlocked the door, stepped inside, and the dog followed him in. Tom froze. "Tom, hey! Who said you could come in?" The dog didn't even flinch. He just walked straight past Tom into the living room, sniffed the air, then sat down. Tom sighed. "Tom, you must have belonged to someone before, acting like you own the place." He figured he'd let the dog stay for the night and shoo him out in the morning. Maybe he'd even take him to the vet to check for a microchip. But as the night wore on, something felt off. The dog wasn't acting like a dog at all. He wasn't restless, sniffing corners or begging for scraps. He was watching Tom move around, watching the doors, the windows, almost like he was on guard. At midnight, Tom woke up to a low growl. His heart pounded as he sat up in bed. The dog was at his bedroom door, his fur bristling, teeth slightly bared. His eyes were locked on the window. Tom's blood ran cold. He followed the dog's gaze and saw it, a shadow outside the window. Someone was out there. Tom moved quickly but quietly, grabbing the baseball bat he kept under his bed. He flicked off the bedroom light, casting the room in darkness. The dog remained still, ears perked, then a soft click. The back door. Someone was trying to get in. Tom's grip tightened on the bat, his pulse pounding. The dog moved first. With a speed Tom didn't expect, the dog bolted toward the back door just as it creaked open. A dark figure stepped inside, dressed in black, moving silently, until the dog let out a ferocious snarl. The intruder barely had time to react before the dog launched at him. Tom flipped on the light. The man, startled, stumbled backward, knocking over a chair. The dog had him by the arm, teeth sinking into the fabric of his jacket. The intruder screamed. Tom didn't hesitate. He swung the bat. Crack! The man crumpled to the ground. The dog released his grip, but stayed in a defensive stance, teeth bared, hackles raised. His eyes never left the intruder. The police arrived minutes later. Tom explained everything, from the dog following him home to the break-in. The officers inspected the unconscious man and quickly recognized him. He was a wanted burglar, responsible for a string of robberies in nearby towns. He had been targeting homes of people he thought lived alone. The officer whistled. "Officer, you're lucky, Tom. If this dog hadn't been here—" He didn't finish the sentence. Tom looked at the dog, still standing guard near the intruder. He finally understood. The dog hadn't been following him that night. He had been protecting him. The next morning, Tom did something he never thought he'd do. He went out and bought a dog bed. The mutt, who had saved his life, wasn't going anywhere. And for the first time in years, Tom didn't feel like he was going home alone.